We're hearing a lot about SPACs. What are they? Why are they becoming a preferred route to the markets? And why don't we hear about them here in London? Well, we're talking now to a chief executive of one company that's going down this route in a listing on the NASDAQ. It's Duncan Peyton. He's the chief executive of London-listed 4D Pharma. Duncan, it's great to have you on board. Thanks indeed. Simple question. What is a SPAC?
So Jeremy, SPAC is just very simply, it's a special purpose acquisition company. So effectively, it's a company that's set up, already has a listing, has the capital in it, so it gives you direct access and quick access to the US markets.
So is this an off-the-shelf deal that you're doing? I mean, do you just go to the States and say, yeah, I just want a SPAC, and they say, oh, here's one, and you just go ahead with it? Or do you have to have it culture-definingly to your company?
Great question. There's a number of SPACs out there that have been raised for a whole host of different companies with different sizes. I think, in fact, WeWork's going through a SPAC as well. So SPACs exist and they go out hunting for companies that are of interest. So when we went through the process, we spoke to a number of companies and we were looking for something specific in terms of something that fitted 4D and 4D's requirements, the same as any other company that's going to go across there. So these SPACs are already set up, ready to go, looking for businesses.
Why don't you just go through the IPO route?
Yeah, it's something we thought about. If you look at what's available to a chief executive who wants to take his company to the US, there was really two options. You could go through a reverse merger. You reverse into a company which hasn't done so well, already has a listing and maybe has some capital in it and just reverse into that company. Or you can go down the traditional IPO route, working with the banks, doing the roadshows, getting to the pricing day. And what the SPAC allowed us to do was basically a hybrid of that. It just brings something else to the menu. It brings you the certainty of getting the listing. It brings you the certainty of capital, but you don't get any of the liabilities associated with the reverse takeover.
Now, we know that you wanted to list in the US anyway, so you're obviously going to go down geographically that route. But why don't we hear about SPACs in London?
It's a good question. I think we saw something similar to it, in the early noughties where people were setting up shell companies and reversing companies into that. So we have seen it before. Just at the minute, there's a lot of emphasis on SPACs in the US. So a lot of these companies are being set up and going out and hunting for these businesses.
Now, last question is from an investor's point of view, looking at this from 4D Pharma's perspective. Is what you're going to be offering the potential investor exactly the same as if you had gone down the IPO route? In other words, shares traded as normal on an exchange as you would normally expect? Or is there a different classification of these shares because they've gone through the SPAC?
It's exactly the same for 4D Pharma. With the NASDAQ listing, we are trading our ordinary shares bundle up as American depository shares on the US exchange. So it's exactly the same company, exactly the same shares, exactly the same rights.
Interesting. Okay. All right, Duncan, thanks indeed to help us through this. The question about what is a SPAC and how does it apply, that's Duncan Peyton. He's the chief executive of 4D Pharma.